Greetings and welcome to the LexaGene conference. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, President Darrell Rebick. Thank you, Mr. Rebick. You may begin.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. A little earlier on the West Coast, but nonetheless, thank you for joining. So I'm the president of LexaGene, which we'll get into here. We're traded on the TSX Venture as LXG and the OTCQB LXXGF. Oh, I hit the wrong button here. Disclaimer, I don't need to go over this. I think everyone's quite familiar with these forward-looking statements, etc. It's not quite showing up. I don't know if anyone's there. Anyway, I'll just go off the cuff. We only have 20 minutes or so. So we're a molecular diagnostics company focused on pathogen detection. So what does that mean? We look for anything that harms you on a DNA basis. So we're a PCR-based machine, results in around an hour. Collect a sample, put it in the machine, hit a button. So it's one of the things that are obviously very important right now and a lot of focus based on what's going on in the world. Plus some other markets that we feel are low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, which I'll get into here in a sec. But again, we're a med diagnostics tool looking for pathogens, and again, pathogens is anything that can hurt you. So right now, obviously, COVID's relevant. The flu will be relevant in the fall. Salmonella, E. coli in food, UTIs in dogs, et cetera, et cetera. So we've just actually launched our device. So it's been a really big, monumental month sort of for LexaGene on a few levels. This is our final design of our MicroCap lab, which is sort of 3.5 years in the making here. So you have a company now that's really trying to think of the right word, but we're not just an R&D company anymore. We're going into sales. And something where you don't do that unless your instrument's working well. You have your final design and you have the whole process really mitigated risk-wise. So we'll be in sales by the end of September. We just passed 30 employees, which is huge. Again, you don't do that unless you're really progressing. This is the final design here, which is really important so people can see it and touch it and feel it and understand the workflow of this process too. And again, the process is collect a sample, depending on the collection method. So if it's COVID, obviously the best way to do that is a nasal swab. Put it into the machine, hit a button, and an hour later you're going to have the results. And they're also quantifiable, and that's important too, which we'll get into. So right now the big concern or the big focus obviously is COVID, and what does this mean for the world? And it's starting to get really interesting, especially for a company like ours where PCR is starting to be recognized as the gold standard, and it has been for a long time. And why is that? It's because you have a very sensitive, specific test. You can catch it very early, and it's right now what's really needed. And you can also multiplex. So right now, what that means is when you're just looking for COVID and someone comes in, it's a very tough thing to do to send that person away when you know they're sick because you're just looking for that. What if it's the flu? What if you just didn't catch it early enough? What if it's something else? There's 19 respiratory diseases that can kill you. So, right now what people really want are PCR tests because they're accurate and they're specific and you can catch things very early, which is very important. And they want to know more than just looking for COVID because it's not the only thing affecting people right now. There's very, very a large amount of different infections that present similar symptoms. And you have practitioners right now sending those people away, sending them home, knowing they're sick with something, but it's just not what they're looking for right now. So very, very important these days and great for us based on the fact that, we have a solution to that problem. So again, one of the things we could talk about is it's starting to finally be quite apparent that a lot of these other tests aren't working. So when you see these 5 and 15-minute tests, they have now been basically deemed by the CDC and the FDA as unusable. They're not accurate enough. You're not catching things. If you're looking at a immunoassay or a antigen test, for example, you're not going to show, well, you can show symptoms, but you're not going to show any antigens in yourself till about day 11 or 12. which is when you'll be able to find that. And at that point, it's way too late. So there's been a lot of publicity now, again, which is good and really helps us because everybody realizes that PCR is where you want to be and that these isothermal and antigen tests aren't working well enough. And the CDC and FDA are basically saying don't use them anymore. And this is something that, again, when you have time, I would go through and look at all this. There's a lot of stuff online where, why are these tests not accurate? Why aren't they working? And there's a lot of detail behind them that I can get into, but we don't have the time today. But that's very important these days to look and see, okay, we have all these other tests, lateral flow tests, for example, they're just not working. So they're just not the solution that people need. Sorry, the slide lead is a little slow. So that's Jack, our founder and CEO, standing by the machine. So you can see the size of it there. It's a great size. You can buy multiple machines, etc. So it's made to be on a benchtop. And essentially what we're doing is we're bringing the lab to the basically the end user, to the customer. So it's a point of care system where, again, if you're in a veterinary office, you walk into the next room, put it in. If you're in the hospital, it can be in the operating room, in the next room, etc. If you're on a cruise ship, it can be in the medical center. Water quality, same thing, etc., etc. So very usable device. So the history, I think, is very important. It's one of the things that, and especially in med diagnostics, when they kind of come out of nowhere, you get a little worried about the validity or how far along you can get with this machine, because a lot of the times these are sort of 10-year plus projects to get into motion, and we've done this in 4, which seems like a long time, but it's still a monumental feat to really go from, like I said, Jack and I started this company, just him and I, and 2 patents, and we now have 30 employees. So, and we've done this all in 4 years, which is actually very, very impressive. So, again, the foundation of this is important as well. It started at Homeland Security at Livermore Labs. The U.S. government spent over $20 million on development of this with Homeland Security and Department of Defense. It was used originally at the Olympics and Grand Central Station and high target areas like that, looking for weaponized anthrax, smallpox, all the sort of biochemical attacks and part of their biosafety program. So very important where that predecessor instrument was then used by National Institute of Health, which put another $1.5 million into it for a flu pandemic. So it has a very long start, which, about 15 years in the making if you include those predecessor instruments. But at least you have that foundation where this is being used before, which is less important now because we're at that stage. But in the last little bit, this is very important to show, listen, there's been a lot of stuff that's been put into this, a lot of info, a lot of money, and a lot of time, and it's being used in predecessor instruments. So it wasn't a technology that just came out of nowhere. So again, also very important. But again, right now, since our instrument is there, it's less important, but I think it's still important. So again, I've sort of highlighted all this stuff earlier. We're a very low cost per test as well. I think that's something else that I failed to mention, but that's very important for the verticals that you can see here. Vet diagnostics, food safety, open access use, water quality, aquaculture, any of those industries are very cost sensitive. And there's really not much competition based on the fact that our competitors can't get their costs down low enough. So very important. We're very low cost per test. We're a razor blade model. We make really good margins on the cartridges. Don't need to make margins on the machine so much based on the fact that the margins are so high on that. And that's very important because you can get the machine everywhere while people are using it, which is where you're making your capital. So that's a very favorable model in med diagnostics. We're 98.2 concordance with reference lab data. So again, we've done all our sensitivity and specificity tests. And again, sample in, sample out in 1 hour. Again, you could probably do it in 45 minutes if you take sample prep out. But again, you give up some of the sensitivity, but around an hour is the norm. Again, the 5 to 15 minute tests just don't work. The 30-minute tests don't work. Again, it's all stuff you can find online. So again, this is sort of redundant to the last slide. Again, we're open access. That's being very important. We're one of the only companies out there. What that means is you can own your own assays. So in this environment, that's been very beneficial to us to illustrate what that means. And what that means is once you, for example, with COVID, sequence the sequence the pathogen, you can input it on a machine and start testing right away. And what you saw here with COVID is you had a lot of these other competitors where you have to embed it into the cartridges, and there's a lot of sample prep and different steps that you have to do to get to that point. So we were really delayed in the fact that we didn't test for COVID soon enough. Whereas when we got the sample from the CDC, we tested, and 2 days later we had the results. So in the next pandemic, which will happen, and even right now with COVID, because it's very hard to get cartridges at a lot of our competitors, you can input your own assay onto the test, onto the machine. So what that means is the next pathogen will be able to test right away. With this pathogen, people are inputting their own assays on for COVID and using the machine right now. Well, a lot of their other machines are sitting there not being used because they can't get the materials to do the testing. Easy use, again, and the original foundation, the predecessor instruments were fully autonomous, which again makes that important where they came from. This is collect a sample, put it in the machine, hit a button. It's very easy to use. It's very easy to read. There's definitely huge advantages, and you can dig a lot deeper too on the results too and see just exactly what those results are if you want that. Low cost, as I said, multiplex. Again, if you can look for 27 things at the same time as opposed to one, the easy answer is why wouldn't you do that? We can do that. So this one again is different markets. Just spinning a little bit there. I won't go too much into this. I'm just looking at my time. So these are huge markets. Obviously, clinical diagnostics is the largest, but also very competitive. But right now, very huge focus. This is something we weren't going to do for quite some time because you're dealing with FDA and the whole process that comes with that. That's changed now with the EUA process. We will be submitting our EUA proposal in a day now. And that's something that's very important that can allow smaller companies like ours to get clearance on your device and on the test so that you can start testing for humans and EUA clearance, and then go to your 510K and such. Whereas before, it's a very long, arduous process. It's very laborious, and it's expensive. So it wasn't going to be done for some time. So I kind of say a lot, this is almost like a bonus where clinical diagnostics was part of the business plan, but a little bit off. But now COVID's allowed us to also focus on this market and make some progress there. And there's a huge amount of demand coming from that industry for all the obvious reasons. The other ones, vet diagnostics, open access, food safety. These were all markets that, again, have very little competition, very little barrier to entry. Regulation hurdles are very small, and something that we called, again, the low-hanging fruit because they're very wide open. If you look at food safety, for example, they're very cost sensitive. They look at about $26 per test. If you're going to do a salmonella test or an E. coli test or listeria test, and they usually walk away from the table. We say, listen, we can actually compete there and we could make money there. So again, these are industries that are wide open for us and really exciting in terms of the fact that we can apply to all these, not that we're going to chase all of these because people think, again, you got to focus, but we will have reps to deal with our main industries, which will be originally clinical diagnostics and vet, and we will do these other industries as well because there's so many opportunities there. And again, food safety alone is $24 billion and growing by the day because recalls haven't gone down in 20 years. Obviously, a huge issue for companies too in terms of reputation. So again, I think I've touched on this, but it's very important to catch this early. You want to catch someone in day 1 or 2. You want to catch them in day 3. These other tests, as I said, day 11, 12 just doesn't work because that person goes home. There's a false negative. That person infects everyone because they are, quote unquote, cleared by the doctor. You want to catch it early. It's the only way you can control this. You want to get people quarantined as quick as possible, and that's something that we can do. Again, vet diagnostics, I touched on it already. Same as human. People don't want to wait 3 to 5 days for results. It's a great industry. It's one of the only ones where you go and pay whatever they ask, which is a great business model for them, not so much for us. But, it's an industry that, again, really doesn't want to wait 3 to 5 days. If you could do it in an hour and tell that person exactly what's wrong with their pet, prescribe exactly what they need, you don't have these issues. And there's 90 million dogs in the U.S. There's 95 million cats. We love our pets, and we spend a lot of money on them, and we want better results for them. And broad-based antibiotic use is not helping them or us, and that's one of the biggest problems we have. Food safety, Again, this is a huge issue that's not going away. Something we could talk about for days. Again, open access. All these other markets are addressable. Again, we're not going to focus on every market, but we're applicable here, and I think that's very important because a lot of diagnostics companies just go for human clinical. They have to for the cost reasons, and if they can't compete in that market, which is to be tough, you're not left with much else, and that's where a lot of diagnostics companies fail. I'm going to jump ahead to here. So again, we've done our prototype studies, we've done our human clinical, we've done our vet diagnostics. This is stuff you can look at more, but important for diagnostics companies if you're ever looking at that. What are your results? Show me your results. How is it done, et cetera. We've always been incredibly transparent about what we do and our results and how it works and all that sort of thing. And that could be, dangerous at times in a very competitive industry where someone could, steal your ideas, for lack of a better word. But we think it's very important just to be fully transparent and be like, this is exactly how it works. This is how our results are. So there's no doubt that this is a company that's real and working and not some of these other companies that we all know about. So again, I think this is all stuff you can look at again. We're still sub 100 million shares 4 years later. We're over 30 employees now. We'll be at about 40 by October. So a real big shift in the company where you now have a company going into sales, you have a company going into production, and you have something where it's very, very exciting times. We're continually adding employees. If you look at the 2 new salespeople, they came from multi-billion-dollar companies. Our director of operations came from a multi-billion-dollar company. We have just an amazing amount of talent in this organization, and a lot of people, if not all of them, have left huge companies, but they also have startup experience in the past, which is important, but have left multi-billion-dollar companies to come work with us, and you don't do that unless you have a really good indication that, this is going to be successful, and they're all incredibly excited. And continually, we're attracting more people that want to come work with us based on where we're at. Again, reoccurring revenue stream, that cartridge, razor blade model, the reagent panels. Again, this is important for diagnostics. If you're just trying to make money on the machines and your costs are too high and your margins are too low, then you're in big trouble. And there's a lot of examples on companies like that. Again, we've come a long way in 4 years. This is to illustrate that. Again, it was Jack and I only in October 2016. And again, now we're at 30 employees and moving on. We've got contract manufacturers engaged. First commercial sales are coming. We've got an FDA study in process. You've got final design. Manufacturing is being done right now. Salespeople hiring, et cetera. Those are huge, huge changes in a company that was traditionally or historically R&D. So again, on the people, I'd urge you to look at some of the bios here. There's incredibly strong resumes on this page, and then the salespeople that we just hired, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely worth looking at. It's a huge validation point, and also a tremendous amount of talent, which obviously takes away the risk of failure as you launch. So in summary, our turnaround time is fast. It's around an hour. That's very acceptable. That helps. Look at vet. It's 3 to 5 days. This is a huge difference for them to get it done in an hour. Anyone can operate this. You and I can operate this. I don't have a science background. The idea is that anyone can operate it. So if you stuck it at a border, for example, a border guard can operate it because he or she doesn't have to have special training for this or a microbiology degree. Great sensitivity and specificity. Again, I urge you to look online on ours and other people's, and you can do some comparisons. Point of need. Again, you're bringing the lab right to the person. That's what everybody wants right now. Low cost per sample. That's important for so many reasons, as we discussed. And again, open access is a huge feature that doesn't always get the credit it deserves, but with COVID, people, finally understand what that is. So with that, I will end the session. Sorry if I sort of breeze through that quick. I know we don't have too much time. I'll just look at some of these. So yeah, a lot of questions on contract manufacturing. So we have, how do I put it? We're in final discussions with contract manufacturers right now. And you want to pick the right one. You want to try to be local. They will be done in the U.S., et cetera. So it's something that we're looking at very aggressively, and something that we'll probably announce soon in terms of contract manufacturers that can do, 100 machines a month, if not more, depending on what we need. And the other question was, do you have a financing to meet that demand? And yeah, of course. I mean, I think, when you are trying to raise money to build instruments for sales, that is a financing that is readily available. So that is part of our process right now in our conversations is, if we do raise money sooner rather than later, what does that do to the company? And I think what that does, or I know what that does to the company, is allows us to be more aggressive on the build, and allows us to be more aggressive on the amount of salespeople, and allows us to really, push the envelope in terms of, exploding in potential on your launch. So that is something we're actively discussing right now. But again, financing machines for sale is something that's, readily available. Someone said, how many pre-orders for the MicroCap do you currently have? Can't really talk about that, but we're in a lot of discussions right now with people in terms of what they want and how many they want. And I can tell you there's a lot. So right now the process is obviously going through that process of talking with them, seeing what their needs are, seeing when we can meet the needs, and looking at the different industries and which ones that we want to sell to. So a lot of the ones in human clinical, we have to wait, obviously, for EUA, even though you can use it as a research-only tool. That EUA should be, cross your fingers, and it's up to the FDA, but there is a very quick turnaround right now with the FDA based on the fact that it's of high importance for all the obvious reasons on COVID. So, they're turning around as quick as 2 weeks at a time sometimes, because it's such high focus right now to really get a handle on this whole situation, which is clearly in a second wave, which is really scary. So that's part of the process. We have, if you look at our sales reps, we have a human clinical sales rep that came from a multi-billion-dollar company, and we have a vet sales rep that came from a multi-billion-dollar company. So if you extrapolate that or look at what we're doing, those are the two main industries right now. They're currently going to all their key accounts right now, and also talking to their peers who want to join as well. So the roundabout answer on that is there are a lot of conversations going on sales, but on pre-orders, we can't really talk about that right now. And it's something that, again, it's in process. So again, lots of questions on the EUA. I mean, on the EUA, they have a tremendous amount of people working on this and clearing things, especially on the PCR level, quite quickly. And it's something where, if you look at what a problem this is and you look at how much of an issue this is, obviously it's a huge priority to them right now. So it's not something where traditionally, if you were going after your 510K, for example, on, let's just say, on the flu, that's going to take you probably a year. It's a very expensive process, and there's a lot of back and forth, et cetera. This has been a huge benefit where we've already had multiple backs and forths. We know exactly what they're looking for. We're giving them exactly what they're looking for, and the process shouldn't take too long. So we right now say conservatively we would expect to have it by commercialization, which is the end of September. But if it happened before that, I wouldn't be surprised based on, again, what the importance of this is. So someone said manufacturing being done right now. Yeah, we're building the first 20 units in the house. So that's something you do for sure. It helps you really on the process in terms of when you pass it off to contract manufacturer. It is cheaper because you're just paying for parts. So if you don't count your labor, it is cheaper than contract manufacturers to put on about 15-20%. So right now we're doing it in-house. That's sufficient for what we're doing. Again, contract manufacturers, we're in final discussions, so we can ramp that up. But the plan from day one is you do your first 20 yourself, and that's sort of, if you look back at Jack's history, a company called Quantalife he was at, they had 18 sales, which is all their units in the first quarter. And Biorad came in and bought them for $162 million US when they had, $800,000 of revenue. So that, we're definitely modeling ourselves after them, and that's something is a good reference point of how a lot of diagnostics companies roll out. Someone said financing or bank credit or issuing new shares. Probably new shares. I think debt is something that scares people off. you want to wait until you're cash flow positive so you can pay that off quick. So again, it's preferable in terms of that over debt. What government support do you have? There really isn't. I mean, I guess FDA would be it, but as of that, the insurance were used at the government before, but I don't suspect it'll happen anymore. Is Trump aware? I'm sure he's busy, but I think everyone's aware. I think this is something that, again, if you look at this from a very different metric is the fact that the company's really changed in the last 2-3 weeks. When we announced final design, you have your salespeople, your manufacturing, you're going to see contract manufacturing, etc. So I think, again, the profile of the company has really grown and evolved hugely in the last couple of weeks, where it's very different to say we anticipate it to do so versus it does so. And I think that's where a lot of diagnostics companies get in trouble and find it hard to get any traction, because there's a lot of promises in diagnostics. We all know Theranos and what happened there. And to actually get to a point where you're showing data and you're hiring salespeople and you're getting contract manufacturing and such, the question of are these guys for real or not is gone. And I think that's a big difference. So I'm sure the government is interested. I don't know if Trump's aware, but again, there's a lot of huge changes in the company that have just happened, which I think is important. How soon will the next financing occur? We have about $5 million in cash right now, and it can last till November. And again, that's one of the questions we have right now, or conversations we're having, is we don't need to do a financing now. And if you don't, you're probably at a higher valuation in 3 or 4 months, and you can talk about doing it then, based on what's coming. That said, what worries me is I think the market's due for correction. I think the elections are going to be a disaster. There's going to be a lot of turbulence around that. And this second wave is starting to get scary. And then once you have the flu season come in, we still don't know how it interacts with COVID. We know how to interact with other coronaviruses, but not this one in particular. So is the fall going to be scary? I think so. I hope not. So if you look at that, do you do a raise now, or do you do a raise later? Because again, right now the uncertainty of what's going to happen in 3 or 4 months scares me. So if we were going to do one, we'd probably do one in the next few weeks, but we don't need to, which is a great position to be in. And we might not, based on the fact that we will be a lot stronger 3 or 4 months. But again, I can't predict the market, and it scares me a little bit. So I guess the answer is we don't know right now if we're going to do it. Have you submitted the EUA? Yes, we're working on the process right now. We're going back and forth with Crazy. They're interesting, even the EUA, where they change all the time and they move the goalposts. So it's a process, but at least it's not as bad as the traditional process that can take years, based on the fact that those goalposts do keep moving all the time. What else is there? I think that's basically it. Oh, someone said, this one's, I guess, when will the 15 machines be finished and sold, and what price? So it depends on different industries. On the vet side, obviously, it's a lease model. That's something that they're very comfortable with. The profit on that is very quickly accrued, and the instrument's very quickly paid off, based on the fact that they can have it at the profit on that in terms of, so if you had 10 tests a day, and we're cheaper than what they're paying right now for the 3 to 5 day test, and you're making $50 a test, you pay off the machine pretty quickly. So on human clinical, it would be an outright sale most likely. And the good thing that we have is the flexibility really to sell these at cost, even take a small loss if need be at the beginning, so you get traction, because you make so much money on the cartridges. And that's something that's just such a huge advantage in this industry, where if you look at all our competitors, and there's a lot, and I don't want to name them out, but the cost of the cartridges are so high, their margins are so small, you have to have huge critical mass to actually make money, and some of them still don't make money after $200 million in sales. So the thing here is we make a lot of money on the cartridges. This is something that's hugely important, because that is what's used every day, and you don't have to make money on the machine as a result. You try to make all your profits as we grow and as we build, obviously you make money on the machines and good margins on that, and you're still making the huge margins on the cartridges. So that is something that we have that some might say, well, why wouldn't you go to make money on the machines right away? The whole idea right now for launch is you want to get these machines everywhere, and you want people to start using those cartridges because your margins are in the 90%. So if you try to make 80% margin on the machine, and it takes away from a sale where they were going to use thousands of cartridges at 90% margin, then that doesn't make any sense. So we have a really unique position where we can be very flexible and very creative on how we sell these instruments because our costs are so low. I think that's it for questions. Yeah, I think that's it.